Hey, welcome back to the Unbelievable Podcast. I am BJ Reidell, back here with my guy, Drew Mahowald, and today we are continuing our offseason discussion for your Minnesota Vikings. We had a couple major headlines since we last spoke with you. Of course, the assistant general manager to Rick Spielman, George Paton, is now officially gone, taking a 6-year deal to become the general manager of the Denver Broncos. So we'll spend some time with the fallout of that, kind of what that means for the team, as well as, the hole that's going to be filled. What new brand that someone can bring in for the Vikings. And we'll finish up here with some more postseason stuff. I know Drew wants to spend some time talking about Stephon Diggs today. There's, of course, been a whirlwind of news and information swirling with Diggs, and that's led to, people having some things to say. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then we'll finish up with our picks as we usually would. So that's the game plan for today's show. Let's jump right into it here with that George Paton situation. This is big news. It doesn't necessarily sound, like it's going to be, hugely detrimental to the Vikings, given that this is an assistant position. But this is a guy that's been with the organization for 13 years. He's had a lot of input throughout the years in major drafting decisions, scouting decisions, free agency decisions, and he's the right-hand man to, Rick Spielman, who's been highly successful in his role, at least in my opinion, throughout his tenure in Minnesota. So this is big. What do you make of this?
Yeah, so I haven't really put together how I feel about this, and I think it's just because there's not really we don't really know what his role actually was. What did he actually contribute to the front office and the decision making? I'm not, I'm 100% not trying to knock him or anything like that. We don't know the shoulder of responsibilities that he garnered
right.
versus Spielman. Maybe he was making some decisions. Maybe he was completely advising Spielman on everything, and Spielman we don't know the extent to the power, I guess, that that Paton carried up in the front office there. But what I'm noticing is just it's just the way he's being referred to by the insiders of the world, like the Pelisseros and the Rappaports and the Schefters and all these guys that have the inside info on the league and are communicating with team officials, league officials, executives all across the league all the time. And all of them are speaking highly of this guy, of Paton. Right. And, he's been offered GM jobs before and taken them down or turned them down. And he had been waiting for that right opportunity. So it sounds like he's got it in Denver, at least for his fit, which is, great for the guy. And he's definitely earned this because, it sounds like, he has played quite a bit of a role in building this Vikings roster in the 2010s, I guess. Bunch of good draft picks. The roster was great up until this year. And then just, the cap casualties happened. But so the eye for talent seems to be there. And I think, we'll kind of get to see now Spielman here. We'll really see next couple of years here, how much of this maybe was Paton, or maybe Spielman was kind of the master genius behind all this all along. We'll see. Otherwise, there's a lot of speculation going on here, and we don't really know the impact of this, and we probably won't for a while.
Right. We could play both sides of this pretty easily, right? The obvious, detriment to the team is that you take a mind out that's been highly successful, right? 13 years in this organization. He's been here for a long time. He's survived a ton of different turnover, whether that was, head coaching turnover, et cetera, et cetera. He's been here for the better part of my Vikings fandom, which is crazy to think of. And to make it even crazier is that it's not that he didn't have the ability to be a GM before. Like you said, he's turned down multiple opportunities. I think he's been interviewing for jobs for at least 5 years now. Mm-hmm. So this is something the Vikings had to have been expecting at some point. They knew that he was going to be a general manager. They had to have some sort of contingency plan for that. And I expect that they do. So, while you're losing this guy and he's been an important piece, you do have an opportunity here as well. It becomes a bit of an echo chamber after 10 years too, right? When you've got Spielman saying one thing, Paton's essentially grown his career underneath Spielman. So it becomes kind of Spielman talking to Spielman to some degree, right? I'm sure they have disagreements, and I'm sure that there is, innovation between both of them, but they speak the same language, right? They've been working together for so long that you have to wonder, okay, can the Vikings maybe benefit here from bringing in someone new, putting someone at least in a position of power, maybe underneath the guy that's hired as the assistant general manager. We might see, for example, Jamal Stevenson be elevated, or some, Rob Brzezinski, of course, as well, whether, he wants a new title or not, I don't know. But, there's an opportunity here to bring someone else in that's an entirely different philosophy, or something that, may add to what you already have in place. Maybe someone knows offensive linemen better, or potentially quarterbacks. This is an opportunity here too, despite the fact that you are losing a guy with, very high pedigree by just about every account. It's not just the insiders you say. It's literally anyone that if you bring up George Paton, it's positive after.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds a lot like Kevin Stefanski, honestly, during, last year's head coaching hiring cycle. So it's an interesting situation, but there is a way for the Vikings to turn this into a good thing.
Right. I do find it somewhat ironic that, maybe one of the concerns for the Vikings over the years in finding talent has been at the quarterback position. And then he goes to Denver, where that has been a glaring problem for Denver for a long time. But we're not going to know exactly the extent of how much this impacts the Vikings until, 2-3 years from now. And we'll see where the Broncos roster is at, and then we'll see where the Vikings roster is at. And we can kind of jump to conclusions at some degree. But when we'll talk about this, sooner, it for his sake, right? Like he's been interviewing for jobs for so long, Peyton has. And, kudos to him, I guess, for finding the opportunity that worked for him and patiently waiting for the right opportunity to become that GM, the head guy. And I will never bash, and we'll talk more about this later in the show. We'll never bash a guy for seeking out a better opportunity for himself.
Absolutely. I do have one question though. Is this a better opportunity, right? You look at the Broncos situation right now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the finances, but obviously financially, probably a better opportunity, and having control of the roster or more control, probably a better opportunity in that way. But looking at the Broncos and against the Vikings and where each franchise is, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to be said about where the Vikings are in that there's not a lot of positives moving forward here. You get some of your star players back healthy, but there's a lot of question marks with this Vikings team. Same can be said about the Broncos. So I don't know. To your point about where the franchises are, I think they're both mid to lower tier in the league in terms of like where do you want to work? Like, where do you want to work for right now?
Right. That's kind of so I was just going to say, to add on to your point there, that I think a big piece of this is the contract length, right? It's a 6-year deal.
Yeah.
There's an expectation here that he's going to be around for
he's been given a chance to, he's given a long leash.
So it doesn't really matter where it matters where you start, of course, because day one's, going to be exponentially more difficult depending on where you're starting. But by the time you get to, day 2000, hopefully you've had enough of an impact on the roster that where you started in day one doesn't matter as much anymore. Now, you're right. He has a longer leash. He has the opportunity to do some real, good things here, make some necessary changes. There's going to be turnover this offseason. They've got question marks with Von Miller right now, if you haven't been paying attention to the news.
Yeah.
And then you've got Drew Lock, of course, who has shown at different points that he has franchise caliber talent. And at other points, he looks like he should, not be in the league at all. So there's questions there, and very important questions, but you're right. He's got 6 years to do it. We're not going to have an answer to would the right move have been to elevate him into Spielman's role? We won't know the answer to that probably ever, to be honest with you, but we won't have a good way to actually argue that point for several years, probably 5 years. So as far as immediate impact, this is really, unless he starts taking guys too, I don't think this move really influences the Vikings in 2021.
You guys never really consider that part where,
if he pulls Stevenson is one name that I've seen thrown around by, whether it's, our friends in CTP or, Darren Wolfson or anyone else in that general kind of area. Stevenson gets thrown around. I mean, of course, Brzezinski's name's going to come up. I don't think Brzezinski's going anywhere, but just, that name has came up as well. There's some good staff members in that Vikings front office that are, now poachable, because Peyton's been working with them for 13 years too. So
I mean, if he can offer more money.
Exactly. So that's something to think about here. But as it stands today, I think the move in itself is not super. It's not hypercritical. It's not going to change the direction of this franchise by any means. But it is something to take note of. And if more faces start to leave, it's something to think about. And I have to say it because, I kind of brought it up before, is that you just let Kevin Stefanski go. I know there's a lot of people who are pissed about the fact that the Vikings didn't elevate him into Mike Zimmer's role and allow him to walk out the door, get the Browns their first playoff win, nearly win against the Chiefs. Of course, there's the very obvious stipulation of Mahomes being out, but an incredible season for Stefanski. You let him walk. Is this going to be the same thing all over again, but just at the general management level? Again, we don't know the answer to that. I'm just throwing ideas out there to, honestly, just to cause controversy, because there's no.
I mean, I like it.
Yeah,
that's what the offseason's for.
I want to stir the pot. Yeah, we're here to talk about stuff, and this is that's something that could happen here, and I'm definitely going to be paying attention to it. When I get to be about 35 years old, so be like, okay, did the Vikings make the wrong decision? We'll see. So, but as far as what's going on in the NFL now, of course, the Vikings are out of the postseason, so we've been focusing on this podcast more on players that were previously on the Vikings and have been performing in the postseason. That has continued into the divisional round. With the NFC Championship and AFC Championship on deck next week. But the NFC, this round of the playoffs, the divisional round, not nearly as fun, I would say, as the wild card round. I don't think we got nearly as competitive of, football games. But we got the Bills continuing to, move forward, and we got yet another sample of Stephon Diggs being, Stephon Diggs, the guy that we knew he was, given the, a very ample opportunity to be the guy in a very potent offense that loves to throw the football, to some extent, maybe too much. And he's thriving. He's absolutely thriving, which is, of course, spurned the discussion about, well, should the Vikings have gotten rid of him? Did the Vikings make a mistake? And just the general person like me that says, I miss Stephon Diggs, but I don't know. I understand that you have, a strong stance.
Well, so here's what, it happens every time Diggs goes off or national television plays a big game. And I think it's warranted because okay, before even starting, one of the guys, I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, we were talking about, former Vikings in the playoffs and hoping to do well. Leslie Frazier is another that a masterful work against the Ravens offense, against, a really difficult rushing attack to contain. He did that really well. So props to Leslie Frazier. And if he gets another head coaching job, he probably deserves it at this point. But okay, so this Diggs thing, right? So it comes up every time because he's getting all these targets now with Josh Allen. He's in the conference championship game now. And he is, it appears to be the missing piece to this offense over the last year, probably a subpar passing offense. Quickly changed that. And now I believe they're top 5 in basically any metric you look at. The Bills are up there with the best, in terms of Rodgers and the Packers, Mahomes and the Chiefs. I mean, you got the Bills and Josh Allen right there. So there's something to be said about the point Diggs was trying to make all along, and which was seemingly, and I think, there was, I don't know if you saw that feature article from a Ty Dunn come out last week where he kind of dove into and had some sources in the Vikings organization and had some sources in the Bills organization and whatnot, who kind of had their own perspective on things. But basically Diggs wanted a passing offense and saw that the Vikings were going in the direction of extending Dalvin Cook. They kept Zimmer around on an extension. They extended Spielman. And he noticed that philosophy for him and, his career is not the best. And he was 100% right. And he gambled on being a trade. Now he could have been traded to anywhere. I mean, he could have been traded to a team that I'm trying to think off the top of my head, a team that just runs the ball and only runs the ball.
Baltimore.
Baltimore. It could have been maybe the Giants, a team with poor quarterback play as it is. Something like that. Ended up going to Buffalo, which, at first we were all like, Buffalo, Josh Allen can't hit the side
also
of a barn.
Buffalo,
but also Buffalo, the location of Buffalo. Yeah. And that franchise isn't a large market. But the gamble has paid off. And so I think we need to acknowledge that Stephon Diggs was right. because look at the production. I mean, I think me and you all along kind of said this guy's a top 10 receiver, at least in terms of route running. He's probably better than that.
Right.
And he's finally getting a chance to show it. But also in terms of the legacy for Stefon Diggs, like I'm not a big fan of the quantitative numbers, receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns. Like those things can be manipulated, and I don't think they tell us true story. But over an entire career, looking at a player's legacy, receptions, yards, touchdowns, Pro Bowls, All Pros, those things matter. That's what gets you into the Hall of Fame. And we wouldn't have been talking about Stefon Diggs and Hall of Fame in the same sentence if he had stayed in Minnesota. We wouldn't be even mentioning it at this point. Now he is on that trajectory. I mean, the Bills are a contender. They look to be a contender for the long haul. And I would say Stefon Diggs was a big reason for that. And so, I mean, the move is right. And so I think when you talk about this again, because Justin Jefferson, Vikings lucked out on getting him, absolute stud, kind of appears to be on that same trajectory in terms of turning into a superstar like Diggs. But if he comes to the realization that I'm going to have a better opportunity somewhere else, I wouldn't blame it all for trying to leave. And so that's what I think needs to be pointed out here. And now there's a few years yet before Jefferson gets there and he's got the rookie contract and everything, get that. But there's going to be a point there where Jefferson has to make that decision. Can I stay here and still get the best out of my career? Can I maximize my potential in Minnesota, or is it better to go somewhere else? And, if he looks at what Diggs is doing after leaving Minnesota and, he sees maybe it's better if I go somewhere else. I mean, I'm not going to blame the guy. If Zimmer's still here and this whole run heavy, run first type of philosophy is still in place.
It's an interesting situation for sure, because ultimately what it comes down to is the two guys that are going to be evaluated here forever are going to be Diggs and Jefferson, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really hard to say the Vikings lost anything, really.
Right. And I don't think they really did. I mean,
I don't think they did either.
That's not, I mean, I'm not trying to discuss the results. It's more about the process to me. Like they lucked out here with Jefferson, and he's a stud, and he's honestly on a better trajectory than Diggs right now. But the process was a bad one, and they lucked out on the result. And so the process is what could harm them again in the future here.
It's not just the process. That's definitely a huge piece of it here. I'm with you that, to say that the Vikings ill-advisedly, if that's a word.
I don't think that's a word. It might be.
It might be.
Ill-advisedly. I don't know.
Traded Stefon Diggs. I think all of us would agree that that's the case. Were they kind of leveraged into that situation by Diggs and his camp? Definitely. Did they have to pull the trigger? No, because there's a lot of reasons to keep him regardless of the situation at hand. Maybe the most important being his very team friendly contract. But the point is that what the Vikings did is they got rid of a guy who might be the most popular guy in Minnesota at the time when he was in Minnesota, and still is extremely popular here. So these discussions are going to continue to happen. It doesn't matter how good Justin Jefferson ever becomes. Jefferson could have a Larry Fitzgerald career in Minnesota, and there would still be some people talking about, I don't know, what if we hadn't traded Diggs? And it's because of seasons like this, and it's because of his personality too. Like, Jefferson's great, don't get me wrong. I love Justin Jefferson as much as anyone. I think he's going to connect with the next generation super well. He's already all over headlines and dancing. He's got a brand. He's extremely likable too. He's got a lot of the same traits as Diggs, but he's not Stefon Diggs. He's not the guy who caught the miracle. He's not the guy that has this extremely exotic, unique personality. I mean, you guys remember watching with Brian Robinson when they do 76 questions or whatever, 96 questions, my bad. It's always Diggs getting thrown under the bus, and it's because he's he's a character, and you can't replace that. It's just, you can't ever do it. It doesn't matter how good Justin Jefferson is. You have to evaluate them as different people and just different, it's just different individuals for your team entirely. And I think most of us are doing that. But the fact of the matter is that he's gone, and it still sucks. We're still mad about it. He could have had 1,500 yards in Minnesota, and we know he could have, because I think Kirk Cousins has the ability to do that given a certain direction, given a certain style of offensive play.
Given the opportunity to pass the ball.
I think that they could have done the same thing, So there's always going to be that question. There's always going to be that what if. And, I encourage people to be mad about that, because do what you want. Who cares? But at the same time, the Vikings did get it pretty good. So you can be, you can
Yeah.
take it that way and just live with it, I suppose. But I'm mad about it. I miss Stephon Diggs I get texts from like 2 or 3 of my buddies every time he catches a pass. Like, I wish we hadn't traded him. And that's exactly how I feel. And so I'm with you guys, but I don't know. It's gonna
I just don't want. I mean, and it's a good chance the same regime is not in place at the end of Jefferson's rookie contract, but I don't want that to happen for him as well, because at the rate this is going, I mean, if you're going to continue to run the ball with Dalvin Cook 25 times a game when he's healthy, and you're going to try to, I mean, that's the thing about the Vikings is when they're winning, they're not doing it through the air. They do this defensive kind of run first, manage the clock type of game. And I think that can make you a playoff team. And it's shown under Zimmer that, they can win that way. And so Zimmer is going to continue to try to win that way. Well, for the sake of individual careers and advancing oneself,
right,
it's not good in terms of a legacy thing for a wide receiver.
Okay, and hold that point right there, that legacy point right there.
Yeah.
I don't think I haven't heard anyone ask this question, and I think it's an important one because I don't think anyone, it's just a weird thing, because what role does Adam Thielen play in all of this? Because they're buddy.
It's
we know
so unique because he's a Minnesotan. So like I think it's almost a one-off where in any other scenario, if he's from, like, I don't know, Missouri or I don't know where, somewhere else,
right?
If he's from somewhere else and doesn't have the ties to Minnesota, I would imagine he'd feel the same way about all this. But and maybe he does feel the same way about it, but he's just doesn't need to be as passionate about it for his own sake, because he's from Minnesota. He's got the local tie. He's connected to the community here, and he doesn't. I mean, he's not like Diggs, where Diggs is just here for work. He's here. Thielen's here because of everything in his life, So, I would imagine Thielen feels the same way about it, and he's just, for the sake of himself and his family, he wants to stay put.
What about the internal dynamic between being able to be coined as wide receiver one? When Stephon Diggs was
that's
here,
another, yeah.
I know they're best friends. Like I know that they were very close friends and they're roommates and all and whatnot. And I'm sure they had a very healthy relationship and very competitive relationship.
They probably still do.
Well. But at the same time, when you're talking about legacy, do you think that Stephon Diggs wants to be remembered as like 1A or 1B to Minnesota passing the football and the style of play that they were playing, which has netted him about 96 targets last year? Or was he thinking, I want to be the guy and get 166?
160.
166
so
targets.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're thinking about, your personal narrative, your legacy, he's done so many things already. You think about the miracle, you think about the postseason success, you think about, multiple 1,000-yard seasons. If you're thinking about your individual person, like, is that a little selfish? I don't think so. I mean, like, could it be perceived that way? Yeah.
It is, I think.
But it's professionally selfish. Like,
you
have to be like that just to some degree for your family, for, what your life goals.
Like if you, I mean, I don't like comparing, professional athletes that make multi-millions of dollars to like a standard everyday job,
right?
A 9 to 5, right? But like in that same way, if you and a team are working on some project and you're gaining, a lot of momentum for your company on some, I don't know what it could be. But if you're gaining a lot and then all of a sudden a new opportunity at a different company comes along, more money, better location, better for your family, I mean, you're going to take it. And if you're leaving your other company, in a key spot where there's growth being made, blah, 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 and you're a vital piece of all that and you leave, that's putting them in a terrible spot. It just is. But that's for your sake and your own, success and for what's better for you. It's a no-brainer. You take that new opportunity.
And
that's what Diggs, that's
right
what Diggs
as a professional too.
Yeah.
Like as a human being, as a professional athlete, we don't none of us like the business side of it, but ultimately these guys need to get paid and they need to have the opportunity to get paid as much as possible. Do you think Stephon Diggs is going to make more or less money now that he went to Buffalo?
I think
we all know the answer pretty confidently there. Now, one thing I will say on the Jefferson thing, and kind of that fear factor that I think has been embedded in a lot of Vikings fans' minds, including, both of ours, it sounds like, is the fact that it seems like the Vikings offense has shifted a little bit more in that favor as a result of Diggs leaving, because he did get 120 targets.
Here's the question. Here's the thing I'm curious about. Is Jefferson getting all those targets because Vikings shifted that way, or is it because the Vikings were just in more shootouts and in more passing situations because their team sucked and their defense sucked. That's the thing I'm curious about, because over the years we've noticed that Zimmer likes to win with clock management and running the ball, blah blah blah. They didn't win a lot this year. Other things had to happen, and so that's what, like, I'm not fully convinced that a shift has been made now. A new offensive coordinator is going to come in. I don't know who it is yet, and maybe things are going to change, and this will all be just a completely moot point. But I will always be worried about that happening, because, I mean, if I'm Justin Jefferson, I see this. I have a phenomenal rookie season, right? Awesome. I'm in Minnesota. How much better can I get yet if I go somewhere else? Just seeing how much differently things were for Diggs when he went somewhere else. So, and look, I'm not trying to make this a discussion about how Diggs handled things or like how he vocalized his concerns, because I think there's certainly different ways to do it, and we don't know all the details about what went inside, what happened, behind the scenes. That's not what this is about. It's just about philosophically in 2020, 2021 now, passing it's the way to run an offense. Doesn't matter who your personnel is. Passing the ball is more efficient. It should be your go-to method of moving the football. And if you have a receiver as talented as Diggs, who runs routes better than all but a handful of receivers in the NFL, you need to take advantage of that asset to the fullest extent you can. Buffalo's doing that. They're in the AFC Championship game. They're still playing, and they've transformed Josh Allen from potential bust in the first round to, an MVP candidate in one season by bringing this guy along and force feeding him the ball.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that feels like a good transition here into kind of our mini preview of the championship round. Like I said before, divisional round, not a whole lot of fun. With
Those
exception
games were kind of underwhelming.
They were, and with the exception to Cleveland and Kansas City getting interesting, maybe for reasons other than what's going on the field.
Yeah. Well, it got interesting for a bad, not a good reason, because of the Mahomes injury, and that sucks. Like, that's not why you want a game to get interesting, but that's ultimately what happened.
Right. Green Bay did their thing. They continue to roll. Tampa Bay and New Orleans a little bit more fun, especially for Vikings fans out there that are still salty like myself about Drew Brees. It's always fun to see them knocked out of the postseason. And if you haven't been paying attention to Antoine Winfield Jr. in his career, I encourage you to check out his Instagram. He as well felt like he was setting the record straight for his father, who was of course on the
That was great. That was great to see. How about wasn't just Antoine Winfield? Tyler Johnson made a big catch too. The gopher showing up there, getting the revenge on for the Vikings from 2009. So that was kind of cool.
So ultimately, we got, I think, the matchups that both of us wanted. I think we would love to have seen the Browns to continue to have this Cinderella advance, situation where they get all the way to the Super Bowl. But in terms of competitive play, in terms of gambling, in terms of having fun the last couple of weekends of football for this season, I think we got the best possible matchups. You get Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers in the NFC, Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes in the AFC. We'll start on the NFC side, since I think the Bills Chiefs is probably the more, honestly, they're both pretty good games, but I lean Bills Chiefs being a little more fun, so we'll hold that one off. Let's start with Tom and Aaron here. It's a fun matchup because we've already seen it once, so these teams are aware of each other. I wouldn't say they know each other, although it is Rodgers and Brady here, so they probably do know every little detail about each other. But two really fun offenses, two very kind of roller coastery defenses with some very good parts that are able to at the very least make things interesting. And they go head to head this weekend. What do you think about this matchup? Who you got here? How you feeling gambling? Anything else you want to add?
Yeah. So I saw that Ben Gessling, I think he's a Star Tribune Vikings beat reporter, and he mentioned something kind of interesting, and that was that the Vikings are the only team to beat Green Bay at Lambeau this year. And on the flip side of that, Vikings are one of the very few teams this year to run the ball well on Tampa Bay. And so I think he mentioned something like the Vikings film against both these teams this year will probably be used a lot by, the teams preparing to play each other in this game. So that's a fun thing to think about is, the Vikings are kind of, in a way, showing each team how to beat each other in that perspective. But I think Green Bay, this is the one team I didn't want to face. I think they would feel very comfortable beating any other team in the NFC besides Tampa Bay. And I think Tampa Bay can simply because I think Tampa Bay is the only team in the NFC that has the firepower to match up with what Rodgers can do,
right.
putting up 30 points every single week. So, and I think Tampa Bay's defense is arguably better than Green Bay's. So this will be a really fun one. And I think in legacy terms, Rodgers versus Brady is something we've all been wanting, in some sort of post. Like we all wanted a Super Bowl with that matchup. We didn't get that, but this is going to be kind of the next best thing. So Rodgers and Brady, it's kind of, it's always been that GOAT debate. And I know Brady's clearly has the edge just because of the rings he has, but I think Rodgers probably deserves another one, and he kind of gets to beat the greatest of all time to get there.
Yeah, in order to get there, in order to get this ring, there's a very real chance that Rodgers is going to have to beat past and present, right? Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes in successive weeks. So this is an interesting game for a number of different reasons. My favorite narrative that's going on right now is Carlton Davis, the cornerback that covered Michael Thomas last week and held him to 0 catches. Yeah, calling him Slant Boy on his Instagram feed. So he has made a statement for himself, and this reminds me of Richard Sherman way back when he tipped that Michael Crabtree pass and then got on the sideline and raised hell, and all of a sudden he becomes he becomes Optimus Prime facing Calvin Johnson. He made that joke, and he built his brand literally off of 1 or 2 games and being a loudmouth. I love him, but a loudmouth nonetheless. Carlton Davis has this kind of a similar opportunity here. He gets to face Davante Adams now. So, I love it because it's the NFL is it's never enough, right? You can't just locking up Michael Thomas to 0 catches, 0 yards isn't enough. Now people are saying, okay, do it against Adams now. Well, okay, you're going to get that opportunity this week. So that'll be fun to see. Adams, of course, just made Jalen Ramsey look silly on a couple of occasions, although I think offensive scheming probably made Ramsey look, give up the touchdown that was kind of going to be the headliner, I suppose. But that'll be a fun matchup. I don't think anyone thinks of Carlton Davis as a top 10 cornerback, but if you go back to back to get to the Super Bowl by shutting down Michael Thomas and Davante Adams, all of a sudden you put yourself in the conversation very quickly. So that's a fun one for sure. And something to keep an eye on here in terms of tipping the scales. Jair Alexander on the other side is the same type of player. He's been a shutdown corner and a gambler as well. And we've seen Tom Brady having, that he almost threw a couple picks last week, and he's had a couple of poor games in which it was decision making, not tipped passes, that hurt him. Packers defense can do that too. So this should be a thriller. This should be, a total points scored of around 70. That's what I'm hoping for. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, but it has the potential, and this could be a lot of fun. But ultimately, I think this is the Packers' game to lose.
Right. I agree.
You've got Aaron Rodgers playing at probably the best football of his career. Tom Brady not playing the best football of his career. Still very good football, definitely not the best of the best. The fact that he has those 3 receivers to throw to, although it might be 2 given the results of Brown's MRI screening, he's got more weapons. But when you've got Davante Adams on your side, I don't know how. We're going to find out how
Packers
much
are just,
one great receiver
too
versus
efficient.
3 very good ones are.
The Packers are just too efficient on offense right now. They're just getting what they want. And I don't see as good as the Bucs defense is, I just don't see them getting in the way. And for what it's worth, I know the early result this season, right? Tampa Bay crushed them. I get that. It just doesn't faze me now. Things are so much different now.
It's also hard to beat a team twice.
Right. That, and there's so much of I think, I don't believe in momentum necessarily, but I believe in when a team kind of has things clicking and they figured things out. And I think the Packers, I don't see a way that doesn't seem like they're just running through the motions and they're piling up the points every single week. And plus, I do believe a little bit in this cold weather factor where the team from Tampa Bay now has to come up to 20 degrees frozen tundra in Lambeau, deal with that after I don't know how many cold weather games they played this year, but it can't be that many. So I think Packers win this one, and I would honestly pick them to cover. I would imagine the spread's gonna be a 4.5, something like that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see the Packers in the Super Bowl. But ultimately, I think as Vikings fans, you get the best possible matchup potentially, really with either AFC quarterback getting there. Of course, Mahomes being kind of the staple, being a little bit more, secure in his position to top the quarterback world. But either way, you're going to get a good matchup if Aaron Rodgers is in the Super Bowl. Of course, we all hope he loses, but
by the way, the Carlton Davis thing you're talking about. So if he can, if they actually win this game against Packers, it'd be Michael Thomas, Davante Adams, and then either Tyreek Hill or Stephon Diggs in the Super Bowl, which would
Right.
be just an impeccable run of if he's able to. I mean, hypothetically, if he was able to shut all three of those games, shut the receiver down in all three of those games, that'd be one heck of a run.
That'd be absolutely wild, especially given the stage, right? It's this is when all eyes are on you. That's something fun to watch. Other than, of course, the quarterback battles, which of course will be the headline and the focus
Mhm.
of just about every media coverage you'll find. Uh, on the AFC side now, I think this is the more fun matchup. I know we're NFC guys, but to me, the NFC is not nearly on the AFC's level this year. I think the top two teams probably in the AFC, Bills and Chiefs, are better than the top, what,
Yeah.
15 teams in the NFC. My point being is that I think this is the better matchup. I think this will be the more fun matchup. And you get Josh Allen, peak Josh Allen, as good as he's ever been heading into this matchup. And potentially, Mahomes coming with, maybe a little bit of baggage here coming off this concussion. I fully assume he's going to play.
Yeah.
But it does concern me a little bit where once you don't know how a concussion is really going to affect you. It's a very
He
cerebral.
also has the toe thing too that seemed to be bothering him before he was out with a concussion. So
this one really might be a lot closer than it could have potentially been had you given a full bill of health. Nevertheless, you're getting Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. You're probably going to get a lot of points. How do you see this one playing out?
yeah, so I mean, there's always the wild card of Mahomes' health, and I mean, being completely honest, I already kind of went in on the Bills' money line just because of the wild card with Mahomes and the health there. But fully healthy, which is what I'm hoping for, right? I mean, you got to hope for Mahomes versus Allen. That's kind of what you want. I'll be rooting for the Bills just because of what they, as a fan base, have gone through over the past long time. Yep. Whether it's 4 straight Super Bowl losses or whether it's the playoff drought that ensued. So they kind of deserve this, and it sort of does give that element of hope for the Vikings fans where it's like, there is a silver lining. There is the light at the end of the tunnel. You just got to get there type deal. But I've been proven wrong completely by Josh Allen this year. I mean, that guy has
we all have
proven me dead wrong. You could find a slew of tweets from me back when Diggs was traded and say, Diggs now gets to go to one of the worst or least accurate passers in the league, blah, blah, blah. And he's suddenly one of the most accurate in the league. So I'm gonna give the edge to the Chiefs, of course, but I think the Bills are right there, and they're playing the best football. Defensively, they're picking things up a little bit, as we saw last week. The Bills are right there. They have very much exceeded my expectations.
Absolutely. I think they've exceeded even their own expectations to some degree. They're really thinking Super Bowl here. And I think if they get there, they have a very reasonable chance to win it as well. I find it a little bit ironic because I think the teams I'm going to pick to win this week, the Packers and the Chiefs, are the two teams that I'd prefer to lose, honestly. So maybe the best matchup in the Super Bowl, the most fun matchup, is the opposite of what I'd like to see, just in terms of my personal.
I don't see a not fun matchup in the Super Bowl right now.
I don't either.
Because that's why I wanted these specific conference matchups. Is because I don't see a way where the Super Bowl is not fun right now, which is all I really wanted once the Vikings were officially eliminated from the playoffs.
Absolutely. I don't think the Bills are going to get it done. I'm going to pick the Chiefs as well. That being said, I would love to see a Bills-Bucks Super Bowl. I think that'd be a ton of fun. Either way here, you're going to get kind of old, crafty veteran against young gun, and you can't go wrong. You're right. But I think the narrative that's going to carry the furthest across, NFL fandoms here. We all jump on some bandwagon during the postseason once our team is eliminated. I think that the Bills, of course, 4 straight Super Bowls, losing all of them, haven't touched the postseason haven't sniffed the postseason since 1994 when they missed that opportunity to win a Super Bowl there. That for me is enough. And then if you throw in the fact that I want to see Stephon Diggs do well,
that too,
being a former Viking, of course, that gives, lends more credence to that. So I'm going Chiefs Packers here. I think that's what's going to be the Super Bowl. That being said, I expect a very competitive matchup in the AFC, and I would love to see the Bills do, if the Bills can get there, that's just going to be a whole lot of fun. That media week with Tre'Davious White too, big personality. I don't know how media week's going to look this year, given, I didn't really think about it when that came out of my mouth, to be honest with you, but it'll be fun for sure. So we've got a lot of more. We got a lot more fun coming this weekend for the conference round, and I expect that. The championship round. And I expect the Super Bowl will be equal to that. So that being said, anything left here that we did not cover that you'd like to make a note of before we let these good people go?
Yeah, Andy Reid going for it on fourth down.
Love it. Yeah.
At the end there with Chad Henne as your quarterback. That is the aggressiveness that I want my head coach to have, and the trust in the passing game to go for it on fourth down in a key situation. Passing wins games. Andy Reid's figured that out, and it's pinning off for him now. And so the aggressiveness of the Chiefs in general, whether it's trading up for Mahomes when they had a great year from Alex Smith and making Mahomes a starter, whether it's a fourth down right there in a key game where they give it back to the Browns and they might lose the game, things like that. Being aggressive is what pays off. And the Vikings are really not that yet. So that's what I'm hoping for in the future is that changes.
It's one of those situations, right, where once you're good, things start to kind of snowball positively, because like once you're good, you can be more aggressive, right?
Yeah. Well, and you kind of get this like
you have more security.
You feel invincible in a way too, where like
for sure
you get that confidence, and I think Reed's got a little bit of that now, where he some of the stuff he calls, if you watch those Chiefs games, like it's kind of nutty and it's like a heat check type thing where you got Travis Kelce throwing passes to Patrick Mahomes, and you're like, come on, but you can be that aggressive if it works. And I mean, they're 14-2 hosting a conference championship this week, and they're also the defending champions in the league.
Yeah, Andy Reid definitely making his case for being one of the GOAT head coaches just 2 years after being kind of the GOAT in the other sense. The scapegoat. If he wins back-to-back Super Bowls here, all of a sudden his legacy goes from 0 Super Bowls, a couple losses, to being maybe the greatest of all time next to Bill Belichick. Another narrative to watch, and as this postseason continues to develop. So we'll leave it at that. We appreciate you guys as always for listening to us. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever else you listen to your podcast. Make sure to check out Climbing the Pocket and what the rest of the guys are doing out on the network. You can find that on Daily Norseman, and you can also find us on YouTube as well if you prefer to watch this podcast instead of listening to it. So as always, we appreciate you guys, and we will catch you next week.